Well, let's get into this now because I'm joined live by the legal and media analyst known as Lionel. Also, Daniel McAdams, Executive Director at the Ron Paul Institute, and former US Foreign Service Officer John Graham. You're very welcome to the programme, gentlemen. A question, I'd like to get your thoughts from each of you on my first point here, because several outlets have been breaking a story about Trump's secret ties with the Russian government with the words explosive but unverified. Why would respected outlets CNN and The Guardian, for instance, seize on this kind of information without being sure whether it's true? Daniel, can we get your point first, please?
Well, this is Graham. My point is I have no
contrary
idea.
to what most
the other reputable outlets like the New York Times have stayed back from making the accusations, and of course Trump himself denied them very, very strongly this morning. I have no personal information, but they are amazing allegations if in fact they are true. Trump, of course, denies it, and most media outlets say there isn't enough proof.
Daniel, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that despite the near universal condemnation of BuzzFeed for publishing the report in its entirety, I would actually offer a counter-argument, which is that BuzzFeed did us all a very great favor in printing the entire dossier, because up until that point, reporters such as David Corn and Mother Jones had used the report to give the innuendo that he actually was somehow being cultivated by the Russians, or they had developed some information on him. But looking at the entire article, the entire dossier, we can see how absolutely absurd it was. We can see it in its face value. We can see the holes in it. So I think BuzzFeed did us actually a great service by publishing the entire thing.
Lionel, a great service?
No. Here's what it is. First, I love the word dossier. It's a dossier. It sounds so James Bond-esque. They're going to say communique next, or maybe cable. It's not a bunch of documents. No, it's a dossier. And already people are saying dossier without asking, what the heck is a dossier? The other thing they say is, with one hand they giveth, and the other hand they taketh away. I'm a lawyer by profession. I love language. The explosive, but unverified. The damaging, but completely specious. You can't do that in American law, especially when it comes to libel, slander, or defamation. You can't get away from defaming someone, slandering, libeling, by throwing in the parenthetical, but unproven. This is the Twilight Zone. I've never seen anything like this. If it wasn't so pathetically scary, it would be the funniest thing on television.
I have a point, and that is that at this point, who the heck cares? I had a talk with my wife this morning, and she made that point that during the campaign, all kinds of media allegations came out, many of which proved out to be totally true, that were really damaging to Donald Trump, and he still won the election. And his base really doesn't care. So if any of these allegations are true, and there is no proof that they are, but if they are true that he was, for example, playing around in Moscow hotels or whatever, it'll produce a big yawn and a good part of the American electorate. That's just the fact.
Daniel McAdams, after all, the media wants to get as many views and clicks as possible, don't they? Can we blame them for wanting to publish juicy stories?
Well, certainly we can on one hand, but let's look at the propaganda value. Aside from what the previous speaker said, of course, who cares? But the narrative now is to establish the fact that Trump is somehow compromised. He's less than a legitimate president because he has these secret nefarious ties with Putin, with Russia. Look, the acting director of the CIA, Mike Morell, even said that he was an unwitting recruit of Vladimir Putin, essentially accusing the president of the United States of being a traitor. So this is what they're trying to establish with this narrative. BuzzFeed, looking for clicks aside, inadvertently did us a favor, as I said earlier. However, the real issue is a propaganda issue, and I think this is the part of the deep state at war with Donald Trump.
Lionel, just to put this point to you, you've got America's next president calling one of the most respected news channels in the country fake news. How did it get to this stage?
One of the most respected? What are you talking about? What? You can't be talking about CNN. Would somebody answer this question for me? I'm serious. I would offer you something. Here's my phone. This is a reward. When Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, and others say that Russia hacked whatever. Russia hacked the DNC, Russia hacked the Republicans, Russia hacked whatever. What did Russia do once the hackage and the hacking took place? If I break into your house and I'm in, but I don't take anything, and I leave, I broke in, it's not really a burglary technically, what was the outcome? Were election numbers changed? Was evidence planted? All day long. And I blame Trump, too, for this. He never said what it was that was done. Maybe I don't understand what hacking is. That's part one of the equation. You hack in, and then you do something. You steal, you change. So even that number. We're not even asking the right questions. There's no critical thinking. There's no issue analysis. And this event they call today, this press conference, was a professional wrestling match. It was a rodeo. It was a carnival. With all due respects to professional wrestling, rodeos and carnivals. I mean, this has devolved into the Twilight Zone.
I agree with that, and I think really we should get to the larger point, not just this ridiculous BuzzFeed revelation. The point about the hacking is very, very real. There's no doubt now that the Russians did hack into the DNC, and for that I say, so what? Other nations do that all the time, and the DNC in many ways had only itself to blame for its problems because, first of all, it ignored warnings that they were being hacked. And second of all, there was substantial dirt on the DNC in for example, the strategies to derail the candidacy of Senator Bernie Sanders, Clinton's primary opponent. And then there's the whole business of fake news. Well, everyone was issuing fake news. It wasn't just the Russians. It wasn't just the Chinese. Everybody does it, and it's caveat emptor out there. And if the American public was so gullible as to buy into some of these ridiculous stories, then in many ways the American public has itself to blame. And then there's the third.
I just want to challenge one of your points, and maybe Daniel, you can take it up. Mr. Graham said it was beyond doubt that Russia hacked the DNC. Is that your view?
Yeah, when he said that, I immediately thought that that shouldn't be allowed to pass. There has been to this point no evidence presented to anyone. The two different intelligence community reports contained lots of allegations, lots of attacks on RT, but absolutely no evidence. We know that the intelligence community lies. We know that politicians lie. We know that journalists lie. So I don't think we should allow that to pass without challenge. I'm certainly willing to believe that the Russians may have intercepted. You know, it's funny, when we do it, it's intercept. When anyone else does it, it's hack. But I'd be willing to believe that they would do something like this. Why wouldn't they? We do it to everyone, including Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande. This is something that we do as a matter of course. However, we do need a little bit more than just trust us at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say there's a huge difference that a lot of people are missing. That it's one thing to hack, in other words, to intercept emails, and it's quite another to do something that's illegal, which is influencing vote tallies. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Russians or anybody else influenced American vote tallies. That I am in total agreement on. It does seem the circumstantial evidence is that the Russians and maybe many other people did hack into a highly vulnerable DNC. And again, I say to that, so what? Other nations do it all the time.
Lionel, you wanted to make a point?
The million-dollar question. Now, I know there's no such thing as stock in RT. But if it was any other situation, I would say, do these people have stock in RT? Because it seems like in the past couple of weeks, There's more advertising, more promotion of RT than anything I've ever heard before. I mean, this is the greatest. I mean, this is everybody's talking about RT. Not that they weren't before. It's an international platform of renown, and I know that. But I don't even understand this organization that is this propaganda mill. The last thing you want to do is give them more credibility, more attention, more publicity. What are they doing? I know more people who've asked me, RT, can I get that on my cable? How do we get this? How do we find this? It's like, because we're talking about everything but the facts. Seriously, I mean, this is the greatest. I mean, if there's really some kind of a collusion going on, I'm wondering who's promoting RT. It's brilliant. Look, I have yet, and I'm not an apologist, I'm not in the bag for anybody. As soon as somebody shows me any evidence of any wrongdoing, of substance that I can explain, that I can understand, I'm with you. But I'm sorry, I'm still waiting. I'm just waiting. I'm hearing a lot of murmurings and talk about hacking and about salacious activity. Listen, the story, and I'm not even going to get into it because we've been doing puns all day about the accusations, but the story itself in BuzzFeed, it smacks. Did you also read about online hoaxers who explained and showed specifically how they did it? What has happened, not to journalism, but to common sense? I mean, we are seeing this massive mental, emotional, nervous breakdown here on every platform and forum. I'm serious. I feel like I'm in the day room of a psychiatric unit, with all due respect to psychiatric units.
John, I see you itching to make a point. Go ahead.
I agree with much of what my colleague just said. And going back to RT, I think one of the laughable things coming out of Washington was this irate criticism of RT, that how could it possibly do this sort of thing? How could RT possibly say things that might have favored one candidate in the American election after the other? Well, of course RT is going to do that. RT on its own website says very clearly that it aims to be an alternative news source, presenting a balanced view of news and stressing the Russian point of view. How is that different from Voice of America? A lot of people are asking. And in terms of RT itself, I think it's a masterful ploy for RT's viewership. Before, it wasn't the case, but now I walk down the streets of Seattle and people say, well, you're an RT commentator. RT's making out like a bandit in terms of this kind of activity and the criticisms against it.
Lionel, I'll get back to you in just a second. I want to make a point. Okay, Lionel, go ahead. If you want to just respond to that one point there, because I want to get to Daniel about something else that happened in the aftermath of CNN. Go ahead.
Sure. And very, very, very clear. Some of the best, and I'm sorry, this is self-laudatory, I'm sorry, but some of the best reporting I've seen, especially in RT America, involving some of the problems that we have in this country, involving prisons and water, whatever, does not have a Russian perspective. It has a truth perspective, and it's also concomitantly reported in other platforms as well. So I just want to, just for the, whatever, maybe I'm doing a needless clarification, but some of the greatest reporting I've seen is from a truth perspective, not a Russian perspective, in my humble opinion.
Daniel, in the aftermath of what we saw with CNN and BuzzFeed and their reporting today on the article, CNN released a statement saying that their report varied significantly from BuzzFeed's article. What does that tell you when a news outlet really has to throw in a disclaimer essentially saying we're more trustworthy than another mainstream media outlet?
See, I would look at the whole thing very differently. That means that they were able to put their own spin on it rather than give us the raw intelligence, which is what BuzzFeed did. And I've gone into that a number of times, so no need to repeat it. But the other thing I think it's very important for your viewers to see is the role of John McCain in this whole thing. John McCain acted as a launderer, a money launderer, an intelligence launderer in this whole thing. Virulently anti-Trump, virulently anti-Russia to the max. And he received information from a very dodgy UK firm that had ties to the CIA. He laundered it through the U.S. FBI and had it introduced into the U.S. intelligence community, and then it looked like a U.S. intelligence report. Don't forget the role of John McCain in this. He has a very nefarious role, and he should be called to task for it.
One of the aspects to all this, of course, as you well know, is Donald Trump likes his Twitter account, doesn't he? He likes to use it at all hours of the day, but it means he gets his point across very easily to a lot of people. Are we going to see the president doing that more and more so? It means he can bypass traditional media and get his view out, I suppose, unopposed or at least non-diluted in a way. Lionel, your thoughts on that? Because what the scenes today at the news conference, he was irate, wasn't he, when he wanted to make sure that he said, CNN, you published a fake news article, I don't need to speak to you. He was almost explicit in that.
I'm sorry. Personally, I love that. Listen, when FDR years ago came up with his fireside chat and used radio, there were people at the time that says, how dare this president demean the office of the presidency by going on radio, this little contraption where they have little funny game shows. They should be in the newspaper with reporters. Listen, this talks to me. What he's doing is, this is an existential threat to those individuals who say, when I want to talk to the people, when I want to talk to them, I go to them directly. And then you can report about it. Now, you're going to hear this. I think we should do something, because let's assume somebody were to hack into his Twitter account and say some terrible things and maybe cause a panic or a rush. You're going to hear every conceivable scare tactic there is. This is brilliant. Every office, every law enforcement agent, everybody, every courthouse, everybody in this country uses Twitter. He is not the first one and not the last one. How he has masterfully used this is genius. And what you saw today is a bunch of jealous people facing the existential threat of their ruination, because we've just cut out the middleman. If the president wants to talk to me, my president talking to me, he knows how to reach me. I don't have to have a cable subscription to anything to hear him speak.
I would like to add one thing. I agree with all of that, and I think Trump has been brilliant in his use of Twitter, and very brave, because when he started doing it, people thought he was crazy. And then he showed during the campaign that his adroit use of Twitter was an extremely powerful weapon that could just plain sidestep a lot of the mainstream media. And so I very much agree with the previous panelist was saying. The deeper element, though, however, and this is something that I think every country should think about, is that if we all get so used to Twitter and getting our information this way, in what area do we get deeper analysis? Where do we actually find reflective thought on some of the major issues facing our day, whether it's Syria or climate change or whatever? It obviously, deeper analysis cannot be done by Twitter. Twitter is a pinprick. It's a way of galvanizing people. It's a way of getting people's attention. It's a way of making quick point and making quick scores. And that Trump has been absolutely masterful, as pointed out by the other panelists. My concern at perhaps a deeper level is that if we keep heaping praise on Twitter and the like, and social media in general, that we will lose for good our capacity for in-depth reporting and in-depth reading.
Daniel McAdams, do you think that Donald Trump is going to be allowed to...
I think
to get away with what he actually wants to do? Because we've seen, you already mentioned the more hawkish elements on the Republican side. We have John McCain, we have Lindsey Graham. You've got similar people on the Democrats who want to come together and stretch away ties with Russia. Now, when he becomes president in under 10 days' time, he's going to have a lot of pressure on the Hill to widen that. We're already seeing people from Europe, past presidents, current leaders, making a point to say, do not get closer with Russia. Do you think that he has the strength in that position as U.S. president to say, hold on, that's not what I believe, I'm going to do what I think is right?
I think he's going to have an extraordinarily difficult time. And I think we saw some indication of that today in the hearing for Rex Tillerson, his nominee to be Secretary of State, where the main contentious point was that Rex Tillerson refused to say that Putin was a war criminal. You know, this is what it comes down to. The problem is for Trump is that they need people like Marco Rubio, who's a frothing at the mouth war hawk. They need people like him to not break off from the Republican Party until they can get his nominee approved by the Senate. So that is a huge problem for the president. The question is whether the president will continue in his stated position of wanting better relations with Russia. I think that's been one of his few consistencies throughout the campaign, a campaign riddled, unfortunately, with some inconsistencies. This has been a consistent position of his, and some of the views, some of the points that Tillerson made, perhaps just for the benefit of the Senate, were in somewhat contradiction to what the president-elect said. So we'll have to see who wins out in the end.
Okay, well, it's really been a fascinating discussion, gentlemen, with all of you. I wish we could go on for longer. We've been speaking to Danny McAdams, Executive Director at the Ron Paul Institute, former U.S. Foreign Service Officer John Graham, and, of course, legal and media analyst Lionel. We appreciate your time. Thank you all.